And yeah, I was filming one time and she started singing a song and then she stopped singing a song and she looked at me and basically had no idea who I was. And it was the first time. So I captured my mum forgetting me for the first time. And she sort of wasn't sure who I was. And see, that's something that a lot of kids fear. And I think of myself as a kid, but, like children. And it was amazing. It was beautiful, I thought. I guess that people with memory loss and cognitive, dysfunction, it's not their fault. It's like anyone with the disease, they have something and they're trying their best. And, with that, there's like a lot of empathy and compassion for her situation. And she just forgot who I was. So I didn't take it personally. And she was so beautiful about it. And she had a good laugh. And I said, I'm Sebastian. And she's like, my son has that name. And I was like, no, it's me. And she's like, you look like him, but it's not you. And I was like, it is. And then she's quite cunning. So then she pretended she knew who I was, but I knew she didn't. And then we just started singing. It didn't matter. And she was singing, we'll meet again. We'll meet again. Don't know how, don't know when. And it was just beautiful.
Welcome to the podcast, Sebastian Terry.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I was waiting for you to say something else. Great to be here. How are you?
I'm like, oh, is he there?
Yeah, I was kind of waiting for
Terry.
I don't know what happened. I thought there'd be like a voiceover or
a drum roll.
Yeah, I rarely do podcasts unless there's a drum roll and a smoke
well,
machine.
I'm new to it too, so we're going really well between us.
That was amazing. There will not be any more awkward silences like that. Hello, lovely to be here, Jennah-Louise. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Sebastian. So, we're going to take quite a turn here, actually, because I'm going to start with a quote from your book that I very much resonated with. And it says, "Death sparks reflection, first of the deceased, and then of yourself." And I know this quote for me, Seb, for me, it was so powerful and there's so much truth in that quote. So I'd love to know sort of how the loss of your good friend essentially has sort of like changed the trajectory of your life.
Yeah. So, I don't know if anyone's ever quoted me, so thank you. I feel great. I think it's
very welcome. I
think it speaks to perspective, right? And I think it's something that, that quote, as you say, was, I wrote that in relation to a friend of mine passing away. And I was 25, he was 24. And so I think it's something that anyone who's experienced something similar, would resonate with. It makes you think about everything, essentially. And it, I guess the bigger picture is anything that happens externally to us that we see and experience, we have an opportunity to kind of use that and think how that actually relates to us and how, we're, using it for perspective, just that. So, I lost my friend Chris, and I asked all those questions that we tend to. Why am I here? What am I doing? Whatever I'm doing, am I doing it well? And I just didn't find any clarity in those questions, became really confused. And then I just remember thinking very specifically, if Chris had his time again, would he live the same way? If he knew that he had if he had the foresight to know he had 24 years on the planet, would he live the same way? And my conclusion was, I don't think he would have changed anything. I think he lived really well. He lived by his values. He loved his friends, where he was on the northern beaches of Sydney and Avalon. And, he loved team sports, his mates, surfing, having a couple of beers. He just, everyone knew Chris and he loved life. And I thought, I don't think he'd change anything. And then I asked myself that question at that point, and I just realized immediately I had no idea who I was. I had just followed people for years. I had just done things that were set out for me. I didn't really know what kind of excited me about life, what turned me on. And that was kind of the perspective I got. The loss of someone else makes you think about them and then yourself. And at that age, at 25, I realized that I was unhappy. And I thought, well, I need to change this. And that was the beginning, of course, of my list. So of 100 things that I put together that I hoped would make me happy. Yeah.
And how do you feel? Because when I just asked this question, actually, I realized the loss of a friend is such a massive part of your journey and your story that you share with people. how was that experience for you, having to speak about something that was, you know, so big in your life at such a young age?
Well, it's a really interesting question. I guess because I, as you say, I speak about it a lot, you know, on stages, speaking to audiences about it. That's not the focus. I mean, that's the catalyst for sure. And it was a very important catalyst and something that, you know, I don't think I'd be here without. Certainly, though, the way the journey's progressed is much more of a testament to Chris rather than just referencing that one moment. His loss spawned my journey, and this journey has now gone on to, you know, better lives, connect people, save lives, change my life fundamentally. So that's kind of what I am able to focus on. Again, it's another example of perspective, right? There's you could think about that one moment in itself, but you could take a step back and go, well, hang on, what did that lead to? And it's led to a lot of things. And so it's really, actually Chris's mom and family kind of refer to this journey as, you know, his legacy. And so, yeah, I kind of referenced the first part, the loss, because that's, you know, that was one of the catalysts, if not the most important one. But yeah, what it's led to. I mean, for example, we recently we found a kidney for someone who needed a kidney who was going to die without it. You know, so that's what I would rather focus on. Is that my phone calling? It's probably the person.
I think so.
I think it's the person with the kidney. They want it back. Hopefully not.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. It's such a beautiful way to look at it. Because I know obviously that inspired the question for you, am I happy? And the answer that I'm aware of was no. And that's obviously the catalyst for you reflecting on your life and what makes you happy. On this journey of doing things that make you happy, is this emotion the most important for you in all emotions?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think it is for me. I remember very specifically. So after I got that news, right, I was in Canada. It was the middle of the night. I was 25 years old. A friend of mine, Bortho from Sydney, called me up and told me. I remember putting the phone down and then just thinking. I got out a bit of paper. I started jotting down just random thoughts, whatever came to me. And I remember kind of thinking and writing, I don't feel very good. You know, I don't feel like I know who I am. What do I want to feel? And for me, of all the emotions, the one that seemed most relevant to me was happiness. I just wanted to feel good. And then I thought, well, what is happiness? You know, it's such a profound question. And, you know, there are so many different definitions, but I thought, well, I guess it's just when you smile and you don't mean to, you're just smiling. So I just wrote down a list of things that I wanted to do that would hopefully bring me a smile. And yeah, so that's it. And to this day, I really, I mean, there's obviously so many things. There's connection and progress and, you know, feeling fulfilled, and content and observe. I mean, there's a million, but yeah, happiness is, I think, at the root of all of the things that I do. Yeah, you know, if I make a wish, it's always. I don't think you meant to talk about this, but it's always to be happy. Always, nothing. It's not that I want this. I don't want to, or have this or be this. I just want to be happy, whatever that is. And I think if you're always happy and you're always smiling and you feel that sense of satisfaction that happiness gives you, you know, in large part because of the way you live your life. Oh my gosh. Imagine being on your deathbed and having a moment to look back at your life and feeling unhappy or unsatisfied or unfulfilled. Yeah. As opposed to looking back and having that moment and going, ooh, oh my gosh, I feel good. I'm happy. So for me, it's very important. I argue it's important for everyone, right?
And throughout your journey, because obviously writing a list of 100 things, these are things that you have been doing and still sort of ticking off. Have you noticed throughout that journey, or has there been a point where you've kind of had the realization that you don't necessarily have to do things to be happy, that you can sort of be happy in moments of doing nothing?
100%. And I've learned that along the way. Because when I started this, there was like this idea of, it wasn't meant to be a thing. I didn't think I'd ever be on a podcast, for example, talking about it. But like I thought at first it was, you know, maybe it's 100 things to do before I'm 30. You know, I have to do these. And then when I do these things, I'm then happy. And that's not it at all. I've definitely learned just, you know, through my story, my journey, that my list is purely a vehicle, just a vehicle for me to try and find out who I am. All these things that we do, all these things, and everyone has different items and goals on their list, right? But I think ultimately, if it's a meaningful list and one that's done well and certainly kind of like created with the right intention, all these little things allow us to get slightly closer to understanding who we are. And I dare say that actually the secret to being happy in life is knowing who you are and then just being that in every single situation. If you can be authentically you, you've done well. You're happy. There's no doubt about that for me. So, that's I don't know. I think that's not that you asked me hey, what's the key to happiness? But that's what I think it is. And yeah, it's I guess like if you read the definition of it, happiness is like a fleeting thing, and the more long-term definition or the long-term version of that is maybe joy or fulfillment or being content. So like whatever, who cares? It's all like pedantics. Like I just feel that, it's got nothing to do with what you do. Who cares if I've skydived naked? Who cares if I've walked across the country or delivered a baby? It doesn't really matter. Those things matter to me, and they just allowed me after the fact to go, I'm a little bit in this direction. I feel good here. And, I think that's the journey. So trying to fill up every single day with things that just allow me to be more of me. So my phone ringing during a podcast, it's kind of like stupid and like unprofessional, but like, who cares? Like, we're all going to die. So it's about trying to feel good whilst we're here, I think. And
in knowing who you are, is this like a, one sentence description of who Sebastian Terry is? Is this like a legacy? Is this the way that you live life every day? Like, how have you sort of defined yourself through that?
I don't know. I try not to define myself. I think, like all these questions too are so, I don't know if the word's esoterical. I don't think it is. But like they're so confronting. Like, what's your purpose? What are you here to do? It'd be great to have an answer and seem somewhat intellectual. But like, we're spinning around on a rock, like through space. Like, the fact that we're not flying out of our seats is incredible. So I don't think we have to, I don't know. I feel like I think life's dynamic. Everything changes. We change. And I think it's just a matter of like keeping on top of who you are, doing our best. I don't know if anyone's got it right, but just trying to do that. I don't know. It's chaos. Like really, it's chaos out there, and we're all just trying. I mean, there's one way of putting it. It's like we're just trying to survive, but like, obviously that's not quite the truth. Like we're very blessed in this generation to this idea of self-realization, which on Maslow's hierarchy of needs is right at the top. But, that's only really readily available to us in our generation. That wasn't really a guarantee for, our parents or our parents' parents and stuff. So we, have to have gratitude for that. It's amazing. And also know that there's so much opportunity out there that, it'd be silly not to try and do that. I can't even remember what your question was. I think I'm babbling, but I feel there's something in there that's valuable.
Well, I think it's definitely, we're definitely dynamic beings, and, we're ever evolving. And I think, I love how you don't just define yourself. You're not a static being, which I think is really appropriate sort of to where you are right now, because I know recently you sort of looked at your 100 things list and you made some changes.
Really? Well, we change as people, as we agree on. And I think it's because our lists are the tip of the iceberg. Below the water is the real juice, like the engine to it. That's where we understand our values and our principles and all that type of, the people we want in our lives and the, things that make us feel good. And I think, when you understand that, you can then make a meaningful list. So, of course, over time, we're all different. I'm different to how I was 10 years. Or I started this journey 12 years ago, and my list back then represented a guy who was, pretty sheltered, didn't have much experience in life, didn't know himself. And so a lot of it was just getting as far out of my comfort zone as possible just to see what would happen. Now, 12 years on, yes, I've done plenty of stuff from my list, but I found out a lot about myself. And I also really enjoy this idea now that I'm able to connect with a lot of people around the world through speaking, or maybe people who have read my book or my workshop, all those things, people who are just in our community and we chat every day. And this idea of being of service and trying to, not teach, I think that's the wrong word entirely, but at least share what I think I know. That's much more important to me. So yeah, my list has kind of transitioned along the way, and I've just revitalized it. So I've done 76 things. I've got 24 things left. I just looked at the remaining 24 things, which are all from my original list from 12 years ago. And I've just gone, well, hang on, does that really matter to me anymore? And some of them, the answer is no. So I've replaced them. I mean, I'm right in the middle of kind of refreshing it. So, I want to write a script that'll be entertaining to people, because I think that's needed. That was never on my original list. I'm trying to think what I replaced that with. But I can't. So not replace it with that. I'm trying to think what I replaced with that. I can't remember, but I'm trying to learn a classical piano piece. Like, this idea of mastery now is like really interesting for me. So it's less kind of like, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am type stuff. It's stuff that has a bit of longevity to it. And I think actually, has the potential to have a really positive ripple effect on people.
Yeah, because I've heard you speak about sort of initially it was more about almost that adrenaline aspect of like, doing very daring things and going out there and skydiving naked, as you said, and doing things like that. And sort of throughout that journey, and I'm aware, sort of number 26 on your list, helping a stranger, was sort of a catalyst for that change within you, where you helped Mark. You pushed him through a half marathon. He's a quadriplegic in a wheelchair. And that was kind of a defining moment in your life when you realized, hey, this is the happiness and sense of fulfillment that I'm really seeking, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I've certainly experienced it and seen, with people that we work with, that people are either exclusively selfish or exclusively selfless. And whereas I think the key is to actually have a balance of both. It's really important to be selfish, healthily selfish, so that you can then be of service to other people and be selfless. I at the beginning, I use the analogy of like putting your oxygen mask on. On a plane, they'll say put your oxygen mask on first before helping anyone else out, and that's true. You've got to have your oxygen mask on. You've got to feel good. You've got to be on the way at least to feeling and knowing who you are. And by doing so, you suddenly find yourself in a position where you can be productive or helpful to other people. So until I met Mark, absolutely, my list was all about, all these things, representing a country at something, doing stand-up comedy, doing an Ironman. And then I got asked to shave a stranger's head who had just created a list. And I flew to Melbourne. I met this guy called Mark, shaved his head. Mark's a quadriplegic. He wasn't always that way. He was bitten by a tick in his 20s. And he was able-bodied at that point, got bitten by a tick, contracted Lyme's disease, and became a quadriplegic. Can't speak, can't move, needs a ventilator to stay alive, 24-hour care team, the works. And as I was shaving his head, I said, well, what else can I do for you? And he said, well, I've always wanted to complete a half marathon. And of course, the story goes that I said, how can I help you? He said, you can push me. This conversation took place via his carer because Mark couldn't speak. And so I said yes. So I went back to Manly in Sydney, where I was living back then, and I started running with a shopping cart from Coles, and like a local grocery store. And I ended up flying back to Melbourne and pushing Mark in a half marathon. It was the best thing I've ever done in my life. And what was also amazing about that is by the end of the race, we had like 10 strangers who wanted to help, and they had pushed him as well, with me and a few others who had arranged to do it. And it just showed for me that we're all here to help each other out. Innately, we are designed, we're wired, we have the ability to help people out, and we don't often do it. And I felt in that moment that I had done something really important. And that kind of took over the next part of my life and my journey, this idea of helping. And I could talk about that for hours, but we're here to connect. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated in this part of your journey because I know, you started developing this community a lot more through this sense of contribution and giving back to people. And, obviously within us, that gives us a sense of purpose. Obviously through this, you have a lot of people reaching out to you saying, hey, I can help people, or hey, I need help. Yeah. How do you manage the responsibility of people reaching out to you saying, hey, I need help?
It's really interesting. I mean, I obviously can't help everyone. Quick note, I just accidentally touched a button on my little audio thing here. Can you hear me clearly still?
Okay.
Great. Fantastic. Okay. I just got I don't know why. I just felt it was really important. I moved a button that I've never moved before. And
I think you actually sound a little better. So.
Oh, great. Great. So what was the question? So I was petrified that you couldn't hear me.
How do you manage the level of responsibility that comes with, because I know that you created a peer-to-peer platform called KindSum, and essentially that's kind of teaming up people that want to help people to people that need help. And in mine, I think it's absolutely wonderful, wonderful idea. I was just wondering how you, on a personal level, manage, being in control of something like that and having people sort of on daily reach out to you and be like, I need some form of help, and only being one person in that. So
I've had to learn about that and creating boundaries. Because it'd be great to say I help everyone, but I don't, because I can't. I can help some people. The beauty of a community, though, a like-minded community, is that, if you're able to develop that, and that's what 100 Things is now, and KindSum, as you mentioned, which has now been absorbed into 100 Things, I can share a story about anyone around the world, and other people will help them when I can't. And so the perfect example is Mark. I helped push Mark to complete a half marathon. Years later, Mark said, I want to complete a full marathon. So he emailed me. I couldn't do it because I was in America. I was speaking on a stage with somebody on that particular day, and I shared the story within our community. And 16 strangers, some of which Mark knew and had helped on the first time, turned up in Melbourne and pushed him. So if you're able to develop a community based on shared values, a community, by the way, is a group of people who share a belief, interest, or goal. And, I think with 100 Things, it's this idea that we should all be living our best lives and helping others do the same as well. So if everyone believes that, which thankfully they do, anything can happen. So it's sort of scaling kindness. It's scaling connection between people. So thankfully, it's not all pivotal on my schedule. But a good example, like years and years and years ago, I got approached by a girl who was on the brink of taking her life. And she emailed me and she told me how she had a rope tied to a curtain rail at her home, and she had no one to speak to, and she just sent me a number and she said, you're the only person that I feel I can chat to. And I didn't know this girl. So I was at dinner. I was at Hugo's in Manly eating pizza. And I remember going, oh my God. So I left the table, went out onto the water's edge, called this girl, and I was on the phone for 3 hours or something like that. At the time, I was dating this wonderful girl called Tani, who happened to be a psychologist. She came out. She jumped on the phone with her. And then for 3.5 months, I spoke to this girl every single day for at least an hour, trying to do my best to put her in touch with professionals, to put her in touch with the police, because her situation involved abuse. And I didn't know which way was up. It was all I could think about. Now, thankfully, that story had a really lovely ending. I talk about Shell, her name. I talk about her elsewhere. She's allowed me to use her name. So she has a list. She's out doing incredible things. She's reconnected with her family, and, it's a wonderful story. But that really shook me up, that 3.5 month period. And it was like this idea, I didn't know any better. I just did my best. And so from that point of having just complete openness, I know now that I have to have some boundaries. There has to be some kind of criteria and measure, criteria and almost, what's the word? Some sort of structure to how I engage with people now who approach me. And knowing also I can't do everything. I wish I could, but I can't. But knowing I can't is a really important thing. And saying no, but let me see if I can put you in touch with someone is a really important kind of sentence that I say more often than not now.
Yeah, I think that's very important, because I had a similar experience in the sense of, coming out from Australian Survivor, 5 years now, but, people that are normally not in your intimate circle start connecting with you and knowing, that you do mindset stuff and everything. They start opening up and sharing personal stories. And at the beginning, I felt a privilege in that. It was very beautiful to be a safe space for people to reach out to and share their vulnerable stories. But it sort of gets to that point where you have to make that decision within yourself of, how much can I help someone without sort of now making me, as you said, over 3 months, sort of now I almost felt like I needed someone to speak to and to have that outlet and that safe space for me. And I personally struggled with it for a while, because I felt like I was doing something wrong by holding those boundaries for other people.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and then that lends itself to this conversation about community and support. It's such an important thing. You've got to be around people who have your back, people who, again, community, who have the same beliefs and interests and goals. And I think even Tani, my sort of ex-girlfriend from years and years ago, as a professional psychologist, I can't remember the name. I always forget the name, but they would all get together professionally to kind of download and share to kind of like, take the pressure off, whatever that word was. So it's a really important thing. And, in this workshop that we run, we talk about community and how to develop good, healthy community and personal relationships with people you can call and chat to. So, yes, I am fortunate that I've kind of created, and I'm fortunate to have really good people around me. And, I will say, as I'm sure you would agree, that that's important.
So obviously you just said with KindSum, you've sort of reintegrated that back into 100 Things. Why did you make that decision?
Well, from a business point of view, it's tricky to start two brands at the same time, but also they're so linked. Like one came from the other. So 100 Things all about. So my story. I was not happy. I created a list. I went out there and started doing my list. At the same time, I was doing many of the items because people were helping me. Why were they helping me? Acts of kindness. I was staying on floors. People were giving me food at times. I was walking across France. It was on my list and people would take me in. And, there was acts of kindness all the way. So what I saw, I guess I fast forward, I ended up sort of having 100 Things as one sort of brand or entity, whatever that word is. And then I thought, acts of kindness. Let's try and make like a dating site, but for kindness, not dating, for kindness. People who need help, finding people who can help. Now, I think, and I've actually taken on a really good friend of mine who works with me on 100 Things now. His name's Todd. And he kind of brought the idea to my attention that it's really the same thing. If people are sharing important, meaningful goals, that in essence allows people to help them. That's what happened with me. And the term a bucket list is, I don't like the term. I think it's very commercial and the emphasis is on death. And, everyone sort of thinks, bucket list. I've got to jump out of a plane. I have to scale Everest. It's not really just those things. Those things are great, but also it's creating better boundaries in my life, saying sorry, learning to meditate, have a healthier relationship with alcohol or whatever. So it's everything and anything. And what we're finding within our community is that there are people who share the same goals, or there are people who can help others with their goals, most of them strangers around the world. And those acts of kindness happen by virtue of people creating a list. So 100 Things and KindSum, it's the same thing. One leads to the other. The way people help, this is the thing. The reason more people don't help each other out in just sort of, random acts of kindness is because we don't know who needs help. We don't have that conversation. I found out people were helping me all the time because they could see what was really important to me. I had a list of 100 things. So if we all had our lists of 10 things, 3 things, 15 things, or 100, people could look at that and go, I can help Jennah with all those things because she's telling me where she needs the help. So yeah, I think goal setting, goal striving, goal achievement comes around because of the kindness of others. So that's why, if that makes sense.
And do you find that's kind of the natural trajectory for people that come into your workshops and things like that, is like they might start their list being like, I want to travel to this place, or I want to sort of do this form of adrenaline junkie, whatever, insert. And then sort of after they start ticking a couple of things off those lists, they start thinking about, actually, like now that I'm starting to get that sense of happiness and fulfillment back in my life, now I'm sort of full enough to start giving back to other people.
For sure. 100%. And people within these groups who come in, they come in to do a course by themselves or for themselves within a group of like-minded people who are all there for themselves. And by the end of a 30-day period, that's kind of how long we run the course, everyone wants to help each other out. Everyone's completely kind of bound by the idea that they're the same. We all just want to feel good. And turns out we can actually help each other feel good. And selfishly, it makes us feel good. So yeah, 100%. It's that analogy again, putting your oxygen mask on first so that you can help other people. And it's not a trick. It's not magic. It's just a fact. It's just a fact. Like I really like thinking, I live in LA and there's a lot of facades here, right? It's also very beautiful and creative and all that sort of stuff and expressive and you can be whoever you want. But like if social media didn't exist and like no one ever actually found out what you did. And really the only purpose of any day that you were lucky enough to be alive was that, you just had to go to bed smiling. I tell you what, no one will be taking photos of themselves because that means nothing. That does nothing for anybody. You'd be out there doing things that make you feel good. And one of those things is helping other people. Think about for anyone listening or, think about the last time that you were either helped by somebody and just how that made you feel, or the time that you helped somebody. How did that make you feel? That's living well. That's being a good human, not posting a photo in a bikini or a pair of board shorts, with oil rubbed over you, and then, leaving some kind of quote from Rumi about mindfulness. Like, that does nothing. It's so funny. That does nothing. It's so funny. What kind of world are we living in? Do you think? I'm just thinking out loud here, and obviously we're not meant to. Well, we can talk about this, but we weren't scheduled to talk about this. But isn't it weird how we are as humans?
But I think it is important. And I think, the way in which people are taking photos of themselves and uploading and, maybe putting a Rumi quote underneath because they're a little insecure about if they just put a photo saying, look at me. I think it highlights a deeper sense of insecurity and separateness between us. And I think, you see less people doing that the more that they feel connected with themselves and other people.
Yeah, definitely. It's all very high and mighty for me to sit here and say, hey, consider your values, put a list together, you'll find happiness, and then you'll be able to help people. It just so happens that I do absolutely believe that is the key to living a good life. Maybe, I don't know. I just think it is. I really think it is. Again, if you took away everything else, what would be the things that you would keep? If truly feeling good about yourself was kind of the key to life, which I would argue it probably is. So, who knows? I mean, with that said, there are things on my list that are abstract and outrageous and shallow. And, I wanted to go to the Playboy Mansion. Does that make the world a better place? No. It made me feel good though. In the moment, it was like, oh, I did it. I did that thing that I really wanted to do. It was a fun experience, like I said, but it more so just allowed me to get closer to this idea that, I am capable of doing stuff. I'm able to get out of my comfort zone. I think when you get out of your comfort zone, you grow. You find out you're far more capable than you ever thought you were. It helps you better navigate times of ease, but also times of hardship and adversity. I mean, who knows? And then it brings up the point, why are we here? Why are we here? I don't know. Do you?
No, I don't.
Yeah. I was just checking.
That's a pretty big question.
No, I know. And maybe we're not meant to know. Maybe there isn't a reason. Who knows?
Well, I think what I'm learning, where I'm at in my journey, is that question just can be answered to what you want it to be, really. And I think for me, it's about answering it in a way that betters your life and betters other people's lives. And if your answer sort of falls within the realm of that, then that's a good enough answer for me. It doesn't have to be this sense of truth. We don't all have to agree on why we're here and, what is the purpose of life. I think, whatever the meaning is that you apply to that, have it be true to you and live by that and in line with your values, I think is a really powerful way to live.
I agree. We do this exercise in our workshop where we get people to write their own eulogy. It's step 2. There's 8 steps that we've designed. So, first 4 steps to create a list. The second 4 steps to activate it, bring it to life. So step 2 is reflection, and you reflect on your life. You can't change it, but it's important to know what it is. It's important to know what your patterns are. It's important to know what your choices have been. So by writing a eulogy, an honest, candid eulogy that isn't meant to be a glowing necessarily, it's not meant to be glowing, right? You get to kind of identify the really important aspects of your life. So, for example, and this is based off my own journey. When I lost my friend, I took a very good look at myself. And although I didn't write a eulogy, it's essentially what I was doing, properly reflecting on my truth. And I realized that I wasn't a good friend. I wasn't a really fantastic family person. I didn't know myself. There was no personal development. I enjoyed humor. I enjoyed fun. I enjoyed adventure, but it wasn't great. Anyway, by doing a eulogy, we would then teach what are the spokes of your wheel of life? What are kind of the 8 biggest, most important aspects that you think are important to you? So to use some of the ones I've just used. Maybe it's finance. Maybe it's adventure. Maybe it's connection. Maybe it's helping people and volunteering. Maybe it's education. It doesn't matter. If you understand, well, it does matter, but whatever my examples are, they need to be true for you. If you're able to identify those really important aspects to you as a person, the things that make you happy, you then, I believe, have a beautiful foundation to then create a meaningful list. And to your point, maybe it doesn't matter what the purpose of life is. Maybe all that matters is that you know what makes you feel good, and that comes from understanding who you are.
I definitely resonate with that. So I know that with, sort of more recently, you had a quote unquote reality television show sort of based on this idea of 100 things. And that I'm aware, you initially sort of had the idea of it being based on sort of going around the world, helping people sort of in reflection of this KindSum idea. But I sort of heard that sort of changed in the creative process. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Great research. It's funny. No one knows I did a reality show. So yeah, I gave a talk in the US years ago, maybe 6 years ago. And a guy came up to me at the end and said, "Hey, do you want to make a TV show?" And I was like, "Sure, sounds fun." And then I flew home for another year. And then I came out for the same event a year later, and the guy was in the audience again. He said, "Hey, where'd you go?" "I want to do a show." And I went, "Oh, okay." He was serious. I was serious. So we ended up doing a show. So the premise of it was me. He was like, "What do you want it to be about?" Could be about anything, your list. And at that time I was helping a lot of people. And I said, "Well, I actually think that it should be about helping people." So we would, on paper, find somebody who needed help and then help them, with a meaningful thing. I guess through I learned a lot about the process of creating a show and pre-production and what it takes. And you've got a crew of people, and suddenly you have to think about the hours and the money, and you can't just go out there willy-nilly and try and freestyle a show. So I get all that. But unfortunately what happened is kind of the idea that I had put forward for the show got changed a little bit. So we did help people, but it was done in a way that wasn't quite as authentic. It was like a little, it was pre-produced. We every scene from an episode, we knew exactly what was going to happen. And I kind of wanted more so because what happened when I was helping people, I would, for example, I think it might've been one of the first stories of me helping someone. I can't quite remember, but there was these twins in Brisbane, Tyler and Zach, I think their names were, and they were autistic, and they had finished high school, within itself was, a win. And they wanted to go to their school prom, what do we call it back home? I can't even remember now.
Graduation?
Yeah. What's the party? Is it a prom? Maybe it's a prom.
I don't think it's a prom.
It's not a prom. A formal. They want to go to the formal.
A formal.
Yeah. And, but they couldn't afford to, and they couldn't afford suits. So I said, let me help you out. So I put it on my social media and I said, "Hey, does anyone have any spare suits?" So within a day, we had suits donated by Tony Barlow. We had supercars donated to take them to the thing. We had hairstylists come in. We had Channel 10 approach us and say, "Can we interview the kids before the formal?" And all this stuff just happened, just naturally and organically. What a great story, right? And then they turned up. They were the kings of the prom. They had a great time and all the other things. That's beautiful because it's organic. It's unplanned. It doesn't really work for a TV show. So instead, we helped someone who, the story was still great. This guy was fearful of swimming. He had an experience when he was younger, scared of drowning. He wanted to learn how to surf and overcome his fear of the ocean. So, in the episode, we got him surfing, but the way it was done was a bit different. There was a surf instructor planted on a beach, and I'd have to walk over and go, "Oh, Big Wave Dave, how are you? You're not going to believe this. My buddy here wants to learn how to surf." And he'd be like, "Yeah, dude, let's do this." And it was yeah, I don't know. It just changed from what I wanted it to be. So,
right.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel sort of as authentic to what you were sort of the ideal idea of what this would be.
Completely. There was another episode where, it's so funny. I never really talk about this. There was another episode where a girl wanted to go out and see turtles because it reminded her of her grandfather who had passed on, and that was his favorite animal, and she felt a connection with turtles. So same thing. We were in Hawaii and we rented a boat. It was all pre-done. We go out there to this popular little area where all these turtles love hanging out and doing turtly things. And that was it, right? That was the episode. But it was all pre-done. And I was like, wouldn't it be cooler if so Waikiki, for anyone who's been, you kind of know what I mean. For those who haven't, it's big touristy beach, and there's all these catamarans, big ones that are parked up on the sand. So I went down with the head camera guy and I was like, "Just can you film this and we'll show the producer." So I went down to the first boat. I went on and I go, "Hey, buddy, I have a friend who wants to reconnect with her grandfather. He loves turtles and she wants to see some turtles. Is there any way you could give her a free spot on your boat, right? I went up to, there was 5 different boats, big catamarans right next to each other. And I asked the captains of 5 of them the same thing. And guess how many said, yes, we'll help you for free?
I want to say 5.
5.
Oh, wow.
So all 5 of them were like, of course. And it's no surprise to me.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's a good show. Like actually capture. So anyway, we're in talks with some people right now about something similar to that. So yeah, so it changed, and the show was good. We still helped 26 people. I had such a great experience. Flew all around the US doing the most epic things, like ice climbing in what's it called, Ouray, something like that in Colorado. Or we went like on a cattle drive and took cattle from one point A to point B, flew into Europe and helped a girl get onto the Moulin Rouge stage. So we performed with the Moulin Rouge dancers. Endless. It was endless. It was 26 incredible episodes. So thankful for the experience. Everyone who's part of the show was awesome. It was just a little different to what I had hoped originally, but that's probably more me and my naivety.
And in knowing that, do you think that it could, you could have another shot at something like that in knowing the experience and how to work with it? Yeah,
and we are right now. So I dare say there'll be something else, in the works at some point.
So I want to take a bit of a turn here and talk about your mother, Ingrid, because in following you, I've followed you for quite a few years now, but there was one video that really stood out to me, and it was of you walking with your mum and her singing and having that moment sort of when you're asking your mother, do you know who I am? And I know that she has early onset Alzheimer's, and it's a video that really touched my heart and still stays with me. I think about it a lot in the way that you received your mother asking, do you know who I am?
Yeah, it was beautiful. Interestingly and awesomely, that video I think is more popular than anything else I've done in 12 years of doing 100 things. And I love that. It's, so as you say, my mum kind of got diagnosed in the late 50s with like early onset dementia, Alzheimer's. And how old is she now? I think she's like 60. I think she's 67 now. So she lives in Australia. I live in the US. I was back, and she sings all the time. And I quite often film her singing in like our conversations because it's something that I can look at when I'm in America. And yeah, I was filming one time, and she started singing a song, and then she stopped singing a song, and she looked at me and basically had no idea who I was. And it was the first time. So I captured my mum forgetting me for the first time. And she sort of wasn't sure who I was. And you see, that's something that a lot of kids fear. And I think of myself as a kid, but like children. And it was amazing. It was beautiful. I thought I guess like people with memory loss and cognitive, dysfunction, it's not their fault. It's like anyone with the disease, they have something and they're trying their best. And, with that, there's like a lot of empathy and compassion for her situation. And she just forgot who I was. So I didn't take it personally. And she was so beautiful about it. She had a good laugh. And I said, I'm Sebastian. And she's like, my son has that name. And I was like, no, it's me. And she's like, you look like him, but it's not you. And I was like, it is. And then she's quite cunning. So then she pretended she knew who I was, but I knew she didn't. And then we just started singing. It didn't matter. And she was singing, we'll meet again, don't know how, don't know when. And it was just beautiful. It was just great. And yeah, I guess the video went viral. I shared it because I was really touched by it. And it's beautiful. We all have parents. We all have families, whether they're here or not. We all do. And we all want to be loved. And we're all susceptible to the same things, the good and the bad. And it was just one of those moments that just reminded me that life is beautiful, and sometimes it's sad at the same time. And it's both of those things, and it can be many more. And you just have to accept it, So yeah, it's nice that you'd remember that and mention it.
And throughout that experience, are you quite centered in continuing to look at that as if it's a part of life and it's beautiful? Or do you have moments where it becomes a little more challenging thinking about sort of, the ongoing development of a disease like that?
Yeah, there's definitely times which aren't great, and especially at the beginning, and maybe I'm sure down the track. But I had to learn how to be empathetic. At first, me and my sister were sort of frustrated. Like, why are you forgetting things? And then when she got diagnosed, it took a while, probably more so for me to be like, oh, okay, she's trying her best. And it's sad. There are moments when it's, might have been like 3 months ago, she called. And I guess like with memory issues such as, Alzheimer's, dementia, it's not just memory. It's motor skills. It's really grim. It doesn't get better. It kills everyone who has it. And many of them choke to death because they'll have food in their mouth and they'll forget how to chew and how to swallow. I mean, it's, that's the reality of it. I think about those things, and of course, that's not nice. And I was on the phone with my mum, and she was she kind of like repeats the same few questions. She's not kind of able to go outside of that. And she asks not to learn something, but just to fill the space. And I guess she had like a memory of something. She tried to express herself, and she just stuttered for, like a minute and I just burst out crying. I couldn't help it. And I just found it so sad that my mum couldn't communicate for that moment. And that's where many people with that disease end up all the time. And so to answer your question, of course it's sad. There is something in knowing the difference between the things you can control and the things that you can't, and I can't control that. So it's, they call it the long goodbye, which is awfully sad, but at the same time maybe allows people affected, because it's hard for the caregivers, and maybe it allows the caregivers to kind of grieve over a longer period maybe. And maybe that's why I feel more comfortable with it now. But I speak to my mum most days, maybe 3 or 4 times a week, FaceTiming, and she'll sing and she'll do all those things. So it's beautiful. So it's just a metaphor for life. There's good, there's bad, some things you can't do anything about. And it's about using that and going to your very first question about that quote about, something happening to somebody else and what, it makes you think about yourself. It's perspective. Everything's perspective. And with the right perspective, doesn't mean you can alleviate sadness or pain or loss or sorrow or anger, but it means you can manage it and have a better view, and maybe not let it completely derail you.
Thank you for sharing, Seb. I really appreciate that. So on a final note, I would love to ask you, what does it mean to you, Seb, to be human?
To be human, in my opinion, is to try your best to be happy. And I think maybe that's too idealist, but just trying your best. I think there are, like we're talking about, there are good things and bad things, and maybe labels are incorrect themselves. There just are lots of things. We're not perfect, and we're just trying and connect with ourselves, and by doing so, connecting with other people. And again, if you took everything else away, specifically social media and all those things, what would we be doing? And I think the answer lies in, connection, doing things which make us feel good. So I think ideally that's what being human is, understanding what on a very primal level is important to us, and doing that. And of course the question therefore becomes, well, what is that for us? That is the question. What's on your list? We have the ability to identify and choose what we do in our life, and try our best with our resources to try and achieve those things for ourselves and others. And I think if you're able to do that, you're living pretty well. So obviously I will encourage everyone in the world to try and start their own list, because I know for certain it's changed my life, and I know that it's changed the lives of lots of people around the world. So it's a question well worth asking.